We now have a great session on how to convince your C-level decision makers to invest in an NHI program. So we have Troy, Eli, and Danny, and this is going to be one fantastic discussion.
Thank you so much, and thank you for coming out today to my wonderful city. I've been here 15 years. I love Las Vegas, and some of you guys traveled across the ocean to be here, so it's great to wake up in my own bed this morning. So thank you for coming out. It's great. But my name is Troy Wilkinson. I'm a former Fortune 500 CISO, and I was protecting identities of over 70,000 users across the globe. And so non-human identities has been a big topic for me for many years, and especially when you look at the things in the past where we had service accounts and all these other non-human identities that you couldn't touch because something would break and you end up with all this legacy technical debt. And now with the advent of AI and agentic AI, it's going to be even more difficult to manage. And so that's what we're here to talk about today. But most importantly is, I was able to deploy this product at my last company. And I was able to get it approved through my board and my leadership, and it's really difficult to kind of rise above the noise as you're trying to sell a non-human identity program. And with that, say how different it is and why it's important to the business. And so this is something that's kind of near and dear to my heart, and how do you convince your leadership that this is separate and new and novel enough to invest in. So with me today, I have a great panel of folks. Danny, if you'd like to introduce yourself and let everybody know who you are.
Thanks, Troy. Thanks, Troy. Danny Brickman, the CEO and co-founder of Oasis Security, and my favorite band is, I'm just kidding. So great to be here. And it's so exciting actually to be here around with so many people. Like 2 years ago, we will have this session, there will be probably 2-3 people, right? Like right now, there's no space to sit down, so just thanks everyone. Thanks for all the people that came in, the vendors that are helping here, so great to see everyone.
Oh, thank you, Danny. And Eli?
Thank you. So my name is Eli Erlikhman. I run product security at a SaaS company called Sprinklr. I'm a former developer, so I've done a lot of dumb things that you should catch. And according to my wife, I'm an NHI with too many privileges. So that's my connection to NHI world.
I love this because we kind of have the whole gamut. I did not get to choose this panel. I was asked to moderate, but I've known Danny for years. We deployed Oasis at my last company, and then also Eli with Sprinklr being on the product security side. Totally different perspective than myself as a buyer and as a person who has teams deploying this technology. So you're going to get some good perspectives here, I think. For myself, when we look at the silos of identity, there are so many. There's nobody doing everything well, right? Everything has its own P&L. And as a CISO, what I found was CIO, identity usually reports up into the technical team or into the CIO. So you have to really have good relationships with your IT leader, whether it's a CTO or CIO in the company, to make sure that you're identifying this risk and you're bringing this risk to the board. And so for myself, I've always had a aversion to especially service accounts and APIs. We were very early investors in API security as well because it's just such an open gate of information to your business. And so with service accounts, APIs, tokens, certificates, all the other non-human identities that are out there, and now with agentic AI being new and novel, that's just another piece that I was worried about. So getting this into my roadmap and my budget and getting something approved to actually deploy technology was difficult, but what I did was what every CISO does. I like to say that CISOs are the salespeople of cybersecurity. We are the sales team for vendors because we decide to buy a tool because we see a gap in our company, but then we got to go sell it internally. We got to convince many of our leaders why we need this tool, why we need to spend this money to buy something to fill this gap, and really articulate that into a risk scenario, because CFOs don't talk bits and bytes, they talk dollars and cents. And so, for me, it was really about, what is this risk to the business? And to show them that risk, I was able to articulate it with some incidents that we had that were related to APIs that were compromised, and then obviously the service accounts that had not been changed. Our annual pen testers are great because they will point out some of these flaws, and they were able to compromise a service account that hadn't had the password changed in 15 years. And so, that's a great awakening call to use in your board deck to say, this is why we need to invest in this area. And that's what I did. So translating tough technical jargon into dollars and cents and risk. We also use what's called the FAIR model, which is a way to put dollars to risk using the MITRE ATT&CK framework so that we could show with specificity, at least articulate what the risk could be to this to the company. And so that was how I did it. But Danny, as you sell into companies, how do you help your customers kind of translate that into something that's new and novel, separating it above the noise of the identity stack, but also that it needs its own program and a line item in a budget?
So first of all, I want to address to the first sentence you said, like, I'm not selling, I'm helping you sell. And I think the way to address it, what we found out as the best approach is actually to build it in 3 categories. And we're always asking, like, what is your nirvana state? Is it like full lifecycle management? Is it developers are provisioning accounts through a single system? If you have a single policy, like, what is your nirvana? Because this is what we want to be in a year, 2, 3 from now. We don't want to go and chase again and again for more budgets and bring more tools, right? First of all, aligning this. The second thing is actually when we're sitting in a security organization, we need to prioritize identities above other things, right? And the question that I love asking is like 10 risky identities, 10 risky vulnerabilities. What is more important? What is more prioritized? I'm not sure there's a right answer or wrong answer, but it's a question that like the CISO will ask us, or like even the CIO, or even like the board can ask, like, why are you prioritizing identities above this? This is the second answer we need to answer on. And the third one is how do we able to transform the concept of identity security to business enablement? And I think this is the trickiest one. There's no silver bullet, right? Like each and every one of you here has a company, also myself, and explaining what is the value that the company is creating, right? And how the identities are actually sitting in the middle. By the way, reason for us personally opening up Oasis was I'm a huge fan of Okta and Ping. And I just need to give like a lot of like respect to those guys because as a developer, I was impressed by Okta. And the reason I was impressed by Okta is because the moment I was entering into a new company or being an advisor, boom, everything was running for me. I didn't need to wait. I was enabled already when it came to the company. It's amazing, right? But from the other angle, we need to secure those identities. And Okta and Ping and all the giants that came before us actually paved the way to explain that identity is sitting exactly in the middle between security and business enablement. And this layer, this gap that like usually is missing is what we need to be speaking about. And we cannot miss the DevOps and the developers and the infrastructure that is supporting that. We need to speak their language as well. So those 3 pillars are actually most important ones when like we're helping the security organizations, the identity organizations to sell the product internally.
I think that's a great segue, Eli. And I know that as a product company, these are things you have to protect. So you're a customer probably of a non-human identity, but you're also building security into your product. So how do you see this, or how do you get your clients to see this as a strategic investment rather than a cleanup task?
Right. So for us, first of all, think about it. CISO, just like any other C-level executive, is a business leader first, right? And they're storytellers internally, just like Troy said. You said they're selling security investments to the rest of the business leaders. So for us to sell to our C-level executives, we needed to tell a story. And like any story, it has to start with why. Why are we putting in all of those efforts to build a new program? And you need to contextualize it to your particular company. For us, it was easy. We're a product company, so protecting access to our customers' data is already known business risk, and this is how we connect it for us. It may not be the same for you guys. And the second part of the why is, why are you doing this, right? And you need to talk about the outcomes, and you need to talk about timelines, right? So you already heard a lot of good technical stuff during these various sessions, but these are all generic things. They're not contextualized to your company. So you have to take whatever you heard today and contextualize it to your organization to build a story why it matters to you. And to do that, you need to have conversations with all the different stakeholders across the organization. So for us, we needed to understand from DevOps, how do they automate everything? How do they deploy everything automatically in a production? What internal tools do they use to manage all of this, right? What technologies they use? All the good questions we need to ask anyway. We talk to our development teams to see, how do you build all the integrations? How do you manage all the secrets? How do you manage your key vaults? How do you manage HSMs? We did architecture reviews, etc. And we talk to our PSERT, which is Product Security Incident Response Team. If you're a product company and you don't have a PSERT, have one, right? So you're going to see all the incidents that are coming your way that are related to identities. Some of them are going to be human, some of them are going to be non-human. So you need to build this picture. You need to understand where all of your skeletons are in a company. Take everything you heard today and contextualize it and build a story why you need this investment. How is it going to help you achieve your business objectives in a company?
Yeah, I love that statement, finding all the skeletons, because the worst thing you want to do is for a threat actor to find them before you fix them. A lot of people don't like to shine a light in the shadows, but making it so that you're doing it together and not trying to point fingers, trying to fix things and make us better. That's the whole goal of a security program that's successful. But Danny, I have a question for you. I'm hearing that if the word AI is used, projects get fast-tracked or they get approved easier. Just incorporating the word AI into something now, CEOs and CFOs are more likely to give an approval. That may or may not be true, but what are you seeing and how are you tying that back to AI?
So again, I think aligned to the context discussion that we were having before. So today, in where we stand today, AI is actually helping us transform towards a more value creation processes things. Okay. And today, when we're using AI systems, we're actually basing it on the same databases, the same sources, the same processes that we used to, getting more value, right? At the end of the day, what runs behind the scenes is NHIs, right? It's like we don't have anything new right now. If we have a Snowflake database that we want to connect to an agent, right? We'll use the service accounts of Snowflake, right? We won't reinvent something new because there's nothing new right now to reinvent on. And through this transformation phase that we're in right now, AI is actually just accelerating the concept of NHI, first of all in numbers, right? We're seeing today already organizations that are adopting AI having a larger number of non-human identities that are representing the access of those AIs to the systems. But also the second piece is like actually speaking through the language of fragmented infrastructure. I was just actually doing a very interesting test internally in Oasis. We did 2 days of hackathon. We did amazing results, AI obviously all over the place, like in the platform, outside of the platform. Guess what? We had 3 new IDPs presented, and guess what? We cannot get rid of them. So because nobody will just remove right now the capabilities that we built, right? So the concept of NHI is just continue pursuing us, and if we don't get around it right now, in a few years from now, it will be a big problem. And this is how we're usually aligning it to a business value justification, because we're saying we want to move faster. We want as a company to adopt AI faster, right? And if we're understanding that NHI is part of that story, right, then when we're explaining it to the board that AI adoption is NHI, basically it creates the urgency to move now rather than a year from now.
Absolutely. And so, Eli, one way to help me get this approved is to show the risk, and that risk could be an incident. Have you seen any recent incidents, maybe not at your own company, but have you heard of any recent cybersecurity incidents related to NHI, and how do you capitalize on that to your leadership to get approvals?
So first of all, there's this great paper by the forum about 52 incidents, so take a look at that. In a context of Sprinklr, first of all, incident is not a B word, so just it's very specific. But yes, there's always, in my opinion, every company has some sort of a security incident or an investigation related to identities. If you're not aware of them, then maybe you should invest a little bit more into your detection and response capabilities. But absolutely, I've seen many instances where we would require to investigate something related to identities, both human and non-human.
That's interesting, and I think that that example of somebody losing information through an API leak or a service account that has not been changed, I think that's just so powerful. We have a friend here who hacked 16 banks in 2 weeks through open APIs as part of a campaign called Scorched Earth, which I think is a Netflix show that they made out of that. So, I mean, there's definitely risk here, and I think that's one way to definitely get this approved. But Danny, we were talking before this panel here about, NHI can mean so many things to so many people. You have secrets management, you have privileged access and everything else. How do you help your customer base define what their NHI program looks like? Is there a standard?
So I don't think there is a standard explicitly for every company. Again, no silver bullet. But again, coming back to the nirvana state, we need to ask ourselves how our identity security will look like in a few years from now, how NHI is playing a significant part in it, right? And then build according to that. Like believing in the concept of reverse engineering, so taking like what is this nirvana state? Okay, I want, as I said, like all my accounts being rotated, vaulted all the time, or being ephemeral, or being federated, right? Or like this infrastructure will be federated, this infrastructure will not be federated, but I will want to do this lifecycle processes over here, and then drive back like how it will look like. So secret managers are, in our opinion, is actually part of the NHI world. They're like, it's just like speaking about rotation, and you were speaking about vaulting. It's the same concept. We have the infrastructure itself that facilitates that. To be completely honest, and this is maybe a belief that we're driving towards, but this is why we established originally the company around that, is we believe that today we have enough tools in our infrastructure to support everything we need. By the way, we don't need more investments on extra, I would say, secret managers, etc., because we probably have all we need in the system, whether it's native or not native, third party or not third party, right? We actually need a layer that's identify, discovers, and actually puts the governance controls on top of that, and leveraging the infrastructure we already have. Why this is incredibly important? Two things. First of all, speaking the language of developers, DevOps, and infrastructure is so critical, right? We don't want to be forcing a developer to use a different secret manager just because. Like, we want them to use whatever is most feasible, most valuable, creates more value, right? So this is one. And second one is we want to be more agile and faster moving with our technologies today, right? So the best analogy that I have in my brain always when I'm speaking through that is when VMware came out, they came out with like a groundbreaking news. In order to spin up a new Windows machine, you don't need another RAM or another PC, right? You can just use whatever infrastructure you already have. And for many people, it's like, what? No, I need to go to my procurement and buy a new PC to get another Windows machine. But they continuously were saying, you don't need to, you don't need to, you don't need to. We can actually create this abstraction layer on top of that, right? And today, like you see where we're at, like cloud and everything that like move from the VM concepts, right? Same thing is happening in identity today. The infrastructure itself is already in place. We need to build the controls on top of that and play in the same language as the infrastructure developers are playing today, right? Why I'm saying all of that is because this is also, in many cases, helping to build a business case. Because you're saying, like, the investment that they did, great, amazing, they did the best thing. Let's put a layer on top of that and help them, first of all, create secure by design, so concepts like provisioning or rotation or automations or lifecycle management are part of that, but also just like enabling the infrastructure we already have and paying for. So.
Okay, and Eli, any last minute thoughts, any last comments for the audience?
So, quick comment, thinking about the nirvana state you described, if you want to get there, I personally would not start with access reviews and I would not start with spreadsheets. You're trying to make sure that your development teams and engineering teams do the right things. And you don't do this by access reviews, you're doing it by building the right guardrails for them to make their life easy so they automatically do the right thing versus the wrong thing.
Danny, last words?
No, what it just said is just like, it reminds me that the world that we're living right now is like completely Gen Z all across the board, right? So like it's forcing someone to use, it's just like forcing a kid right now not to watch this show on Netflix. It's like, you cannot do that. You just like need to put the guardrails, as you mentioned.
I control Wi-Fi in my house, so I can still do this.
But yeah, I think that the concept that it brings right now is like very, very important. Like we cannot force, we want to work together in order to get to the point of nirvana, first of all, and then come together for a business justification.
Absolutely, and I think my last words are that, if you want executive support, you have to speak their language, which is risk, resilience, and business enablement. And then the last thing is that non-human identities are like ghosts. They're everywhere, nobody sees them, and everyone's afraid to touch them. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you very much.